Hello, Larry.
Hello. You're the first person to join me this morning. Although we were only expecting yeah, my mind's going blank. Both Arte and Susan won't be with us today. I just got to the neighborhood and noticed that I'm wearing the wrong shirt. So I guess I gotta go back. Zeke is the only one who's going to be joining us today. I don't know why his name slipped from my mind for so long. Okay. Just to make absolutely certain everyone can hear me, correct?
Hello.
Hey, you.
Hi, Zeke.
I can hear everybody, so that's good.
We're going to be short-staffed today. Susan is out sick, and Arte is on the road traveling.
Well, at least this time we're going to a new location.
Yep. Or I should say yes and no.
Yeah, I should have seen that one.
At the moment, there are only 3 people in the cavern other than Zeke and I. But we're showing 12 on the stream. For those of you who have just joined us, sorry for the lack of conversation between us, but two of the more talkative ones, which are Susan and Arte, are both going to be missing this weekend. Susan is down sick, and Arte is out on the road. She should be back in action next month. But without those two to carry the conversation, I kind of tend to lapse into my natural state of keeping my mouth shut. Got it, Shiloh. Okay, that's it for the music pre-tour. Mirfak, in the stream chat, can you type the command for the bot to transfer us to the new Guild of Greeters pub? I think I'd like to start the tour there.
The new sorry, can you repeat, please?
The new Guild of Guild of Messengers pub. I'm sorry, that was my mistake.
The new Messengers pub. You want?
Yes.
Where is it? I forgot. Messenger, commit of new. What I mean, there is some mob commit pub. I put that. I don't know. Check.
While he's looking that up, Zeke, if you want to get us started. Oops. Zeke must be away from his computer at the moment.
There I am.
Okay. If you care to get us started while
Yeah.
Mirfac is
Okay.
looking up.
So, also, let me do this quick. So, welcome to the Cavern Tours. You should be hearing us through Twitch. I'll put a link to Twitch. Make sure the game is in windowed mode because we will be switching between Twitch and the game back and forth to share things that cannot be shared in the game. Number two, if the sounds are too loud, you can go to your rent settings, audio settings, turn down your ambience, music, and sound effects. If you need to hear if noises are too loud in the game, turn all those down. Then you'll be able to hear what Larry's saying. We are exploring different ages. We will try to be as spoiler free as possible, but just know that certain ages that we go to will be heavily spoiled. So it is a good idea to complete some of those ages when we get to them. The second thing is if you don't have Mirrorbot as a friend, you need to add him as a friend since we will be using Mirrorbot in order to go to these ages and get into places where you wouldn't normally be able to get to. And if you please stay with the group. Try not to climb any ladders or anything. That it will be provided by our tech person to be able to warp us to different areas. If you fall out of the age and you need to rejoin the group, just PM the bot, and then I think it's follow or find Larry to join with the group. There will be sections for questions. And so be prepared to ask any questions. It would be nice to keep your questions relevant to the age that we are exploring because some of the questions might be answered in another tour. So just keep them relevant to that. Let's see. Is there anything else I'm missing?
It shouldn't be. It's not like the requirements are not as stringent as they used to be before we started using Twitch for the audio.
Yeah.
It's not. Okay. In the meantime, Mirfac, did you find the command to have the bot send us to the new messenger pub?
Each one.
I was trying to have to avoid looking at the commands myself.
I know where he's at. He's not there, but he's in a different one.
Yeah. Well, that's because he can't warp us to the new messenger pub since it's a public age.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but he does have a bot command to have him send you to it directly.
Should we start with that one?
That's what I'm planning on doing. But I'm.
The bot is right now in the new Gummy Pub. So you can.
Oh, he is?
If you
I
want.
thought. Okay, I didn't know you could go there. Okay, in that case, everyone, please type link as a private message to Mirabot, and we should be able to get started. Zeke, if you want to do the cat herding today?
Yep, I'll stay behind to get
Mm-hmm.
everyone. Do this.
Okay.
Few here.
Let me know when everyone's in the right place.
Uh, Give them a few minutes.
Scott
And,
Miller, you need to send that message to the bot, not me.
okay. And I believe. Okay, one of them's on the surface. So I'm headed out.
Okay. In that case, welcome to today's tour, which is going to be dealing with the Denis guilds. The first thing that we need to know about the guilds is that they were the major economic and social engines of Denis society. After the abdication of King Kurith, 5 guild masters became the city council, a new system of government that Kurith developed and which replaced the monarchy. The council technically was a regency that was to rule Denis until the coming of the quote-unquote true great king. Kareth had been raised by his mother to believe that King Alcindar was not the great king of the prophecies of Urpa. Of course, what was never explained is how they were supposed to welcome the new great king if they no longer had a monarchy. But I guess that's just details. Excuse me for a second. My note taking computer has just decided that this is a fine and dandy time for it to ask me to restart. Okay. Anyway, membership in the major guilds were usually restricted to the rich and the noble, but it was possible for both men and women to join minor guilds after completing 15 years of primary education. Male children of members of major guilds were an exception to that. They were automatically granted entrance into one or another of the major guilds, depending on who had space for them or their own inclinations or talents. Children of major guild members were taken from their families and inducted into a guild at the age of 4 and were schooled by the guild. Female children, however, were not eligible for membership in the major guilds, although they could join a minor guild after the normal 15-year education. There were 18 major guilds established after the Denis caverns were settled. They were based on the guild structure of the Rhone people of Gartenay. The Guild of Writers was the most prestigious of the guilds because of the ability to create ages, what was thought of as both a great privilege and an equally great responsibility. Guild laws and organization and helped ensure that all writers were trained to follow the rules that were thought necessary to write ages that were both stable and safe. When the Denis moved to the Cavern, setting up the Guild of Riders was one of their first priorities. It even came before the construction of the Temple of Yavo, and came second only to the construction of the Great Zero. The Guild's buildings were completed in the 8th year of the Denis era, which would have been 7649 BC on the surface. And the opening of the Guild of Riders was cause for celebration. Forever after, the anniversary of the opening of the Riders Guild Hall was a day of note on the Denis calendar. The construction of the last of the 18 major guild halls was completed in the 100th year of the Denis calendar, and all of the guilds were dedicated to the service of Yavo on Linovu 18th in the Denis year 100. That was April 8th, 7556 BC on the surface. That event was called the Day of the Circle and was a grand celebration. Even though each guild had their own traditions, each guild operated under the same basic hierarchies. Members were inducted into service as apprentices. When they completed their basic training, they attained the rank of guildsman or guild member. Each guild had numerous guild masters who had served for many years, and each guild was led by a grand master. The 5 ranks in the Denis Guild were, in descending order, Grand Master, Guild Master, Guild Captain, Guildsman, and Guild Apprentice. The Grand Master was the head of the guild, and there was never more than one. There were many guild masters who supervised the lower ranks or were assistants to the Grand Master. Below them were the guild captains who were assigned as project heads for various endeavors. The rank and file were made up of the guildsmen and guild apprentices. When King Kurith abdicated, he formed a regency government made up of a council of 5 grandmasters from the 18 major guilds, who were in turn elected by the 18 major guilds as a whole. In time, it was decided to expand the council so that all of the major guilds were represented equally. Each of the 18 guild council seats were filled by a guild master who was elected from among his guild to represent them. Of course, only one of the guild masters from a guild was elected at a given time and served for life. The original 5 council seats that had been filled by grandmasters were retained, but the grandmasters who held them were required to retire from their guilds and were instead given the title of Great Lord. Each of their guilds selected a new grandmaster to replace them at that time. The Great Lords were still often referred to as grandmasters by their guilds, but that was no longer an official title. Their actual title was simply Great Lord, and they no longer had any authority over their former guilds except what was given to them out of respect and reverence. When a Great Lord died, a replacement could come from any of the 18 major guilds. At the time that Anna discovered Denis, the Great Lords were alumni of the guilds of writers, miners, books, ink makers, and maintainers. How a replacement for a dead Great Lord was chosen, in other words, whether it was by seniority, age, popularity, some kind of vote, or even some other method entirely, is unknown because we don't have any references to it in Denis history. As a guess, it was probably by a vote of the council, but that could be wrong. Some of the significant things that happened in Denis history. In Denis year 1124, King Mararon decreed a number of major revisions to the educational system. Common schools were placed in various residential districts and were under the authority and guidance of the Guild of Legislators. The number of years of compulsory education were increased from 6 to 15, after which students could enter one of the newly established minor guilds. In Denis year 1975, King Meerta attempted to change the Writers' Guild oath that had been written by Ailish at the urging and that had been written by Ailish. Meerta had tried to change it at the urging of his mother Jolatha, in an attempt to make them swear to serve the interests of the throne rather than the interests mainly of the Denis people. Grandmaster writer Tremal objected and was assassinated for it. This caused the Writers' Guild members to close ranks and refuse to change their oath. By the way, the oath that we're talking about is different from the rules and regulations of the guild. The oath had been placed there by Ailish in order to ensure that Rinref's philosophies would be enshrined. Rinref had broken away from the Writers' Guild of Garternay in order to, because he objected to writing ages so that the inhabitants could be slaves to the Rhone people. And that was a big part of the oath. But it also included an oath to serve the interests of Yavo and Denis as a whole, and Jolatha basically wanted to change that so that their first loyalty was to the crown and the crown's decrees over anything else. Okay. In Denis year 2350, the Guild of Miners, who had been a minor guild, which is I always find funny to say because it's the difference of one letter. In any case, they were encouraged by King Hemelin to innovate and improve their methods and technologies for extracting ore, creating new types of building materials, and excavating new living spaces. In Denis year 2488, they completed successful tests of a new technology which was called stone extrusion. This was considered to be so important to Denis that the guild was raised from minor to major status. However, Denis had 18 major guilds, and tradition stated that they could never have more than 18. So in order to maintain the limit, the major guild of fine artists was dissolved, and its members were split into minor guilds of sculptors, artists, actors, and musicians. Strangely enough, this was not protested by the Guild of Fine Artists, because the split actually was of benefit to them. Each branch of the fine arts gained its own funding, hierarchy, and patronage, instead of having to campaign for the attention from the same leadership organization. In the year 2504, the guild council chambers were completed. The new hall was constructed atop the tomb of the great king, making the tomb barely visible. The chamber included a hidden vault where King Nagan stored much of the royal treasury. When the Guild of Miners were elevated to major guild status, they began building a new headquarters for themselves. In the year 2580, the new facilities were completed using extrusion technology. This was, at rather appropriately, the first use of that method. In 2916, the Mechanist Guild expanded on the work of the miners and developed industrial extrusion. This was a refined version of the technology that led to improved construction methods such as unistructural buildings, a technique in which large stone expanses were joined almost seamlessly. In 3500, women were made eligible for minor guild educations for the first time in either Denis or Rhône history. This enormous stride toward the status of women in Denis society took a heavy blow in Denis year 3523 when Shama, the wife of King Tiamel, successfully convinced the guild council to not allow women into the major guilds. This was strange because Shama had been the one who had pushed through the idea that they should be allowed into the minor guilds. In year 3961, the Minor Guild of Illusions was established. Reliema, which is a Denis phrase meaning the unseen, was simultaneously created as a secret state police agency, and the Illusionist Guild was used as a cover for it. In 4721, the major guilds were forced to accept some students who had passed entrance exams but could not afford their ever-growing membership fees. In 4626, the first scholarship students of the Guild of Stonemasons devised an early fusion compounding technology which proved to be the first step toward the creation of Nara, a synthetic stone with a metallic sheen. Nara had 30 times the density of steel and was used to coat and reinforce excavation sites, tunnels, and to construct some buildings. In 5043, Faresh was appointed as the head of the Illusionist Guild by King Yablashan. His real purpose was to clean up Reliema, which had gained a poor reputation regarding the way it conducted its operations. Faresh began the construction of a mansion of illusions on Katha Island, which came to be known as the Mystery House. It was also the headquarters of Reliema. In 5236, Darathini was first produced in a lab by the Guild of Stonemasons. Darathini was a lightweight stone product. It was molecularly altered for strength and was a step on the path to the creation of Nara. In 5307, Nara, which was the hardest of all Denis stone, was produced in a lab by the Guild of Stonemasons and the miners as a cooperative effort. In 4373, Darathini was adopted and used by the Maintainers Guild to construct improved armored environmental suits. Those suits, by the way, can be seen in the age of Garrison. When you go into the dressing of the locker rooms in that age, you will see the suits made of Daretheni near the entrance. This meant that the riders could be more experimental with their ages, since maintainers were better protected. Daretheni was used to completely cover heavy environmental armor for the first men to enter a new age, and it was also used in the helmets and armor plates on the maintainers' normal working outfits. The hydraulic rods that gave the suits their flexibility were made of the same material. And in Denis year 6970, construction began on a new guild council hall, which further buried the tomb of the great king. This was the last major event in the history of the guilds before the fall of Denis. And I will stop here for a moment. Do we have any questions that I missed?
I have one from Shiloh Brown that says, "What incidents in religious doctrine?"
Okay, I see that one. Inconsistency in religious doctrine. Oh God, the Denis were a highly religious people throughout their history, and schisms, heretics, differences over what they thought that the religion should be were extremely common. They literally fought wars over them. As a matter of fact, at some point when we talk about King Alcindar and the Pinto War, that was all about religion. So we'll be going into that in great detail in a future tour.
There's no other questions that I can see.
Okay. And let's see. So let's go ahead and talk about the list of known major guilds. The 18 major guilds at the time of the fall of Denis, in order of their importance, all, for the most part, all own their own private ages. So let's go over a list of them and see who was who. First off, from day one in the Denis Empire, the Guild of Writers were the number one guild in all of the empire, and they stayed that way throughout their entire history. They wore formal robes that were colored black and had dark red trim on them. And they were known for an age called Yakul, which is where they went to when they were elevating a new guildsman or guild master and increasing their rank. That was also where they held the Korfa Vajah, which means first book ceremony. This was a time in a Denis writer's career when he wrote the first book that was accepted as being usable by his fellow guild masters and the maintainers. They would have a big party to celebrate the fact that he had successfully written a book. The second most important guild was the Guild of Maintainers, who had burgundy robes. And they, of course, are known for the age of Garrison, which is where they did research and development as well as training an elite corps of maintainers. Next came the Guild of Ink Makers, who wore purple robes and were known for an age called Vinalim, which was one of the ages where they grew seed pods there that ink beetles like to eat, and so it was a place where that they went to raise or to gather food for raising the ink beetles. The Guild of Books wore pale cream and were known for two ages called Menes and Trasis. Let's see. The Guild of Miners wore royal blue, and I do not know an age that they are associated with. Then there was the Guild of Surveyors, who wore pale blue, and they of course are noted for Minkata, which was a training age. The Guild of Legislators wore crimson and were known for an age called Gadar, which is where they kept most of their books. We're talking books about laws and such. The Guild of Messengers wore yellow. The Guild of Cartographers wore turquoise. And the Guild of Caterers wore emerald green. And they had many ages under their control, which were all involved in the production of food. Those ages included Urkana, Urduna, Urchara, Heraias, and Shemas. The Guild of Heaters were salmon pink, and one of their most important ages was called Bereni. The Guild of Mechanists wore brown. The Guild of Analysts wore orange. The Guild of Stonemasons wore pale green. The Guild of Engineers wore green with brown trim. The Guild of Linguists wore white. The Archivists wore gold. And the Chemists wore lime green. Each guild, of course, had its own unique insignia and colors. Official guild robes and formal cloaks were dyed in the guild colors, and the major guilds also had their own meeting halls where the members lived and worked, although members with families might also own their own homes. Guild halls could be single buildings or entire building complexes might be constructed for the larger guilds, such as the riders or maintainers. The maintainers, for instance, had a number of secure linking chambers in their headquarters, which were used when they were testing out new ages. Members were expected to abide by guild rules and have a sense of pride for their guild, and violation of guild rules could result in expulsion. That was something that happened in the case of Agaeris, who was the person most responsible for the fall of Denis. And one of the reasons why he destroyed Denis was because he felt that his treatment by Denis was unfair. Now, not very much is known about the minor guilds, other than there were a great many of them. None of their members were eligible to serve on the Denis Council. The minor guilds that I know about are the guilds of actors, architects, artists, bankers, burial workers, chemists, educators, illusionists, musicians, sculptors, tour guides, and zoologists. A fact that Dr. Watson recently confirmed was that a lot of minor guilds existed that were cadet branches of the major guilds. A reasonable but unconfirmed guess is that the major guild of archivists might have had a minor guild of librarians as a cadet branch. A known example is the minor guild of tour guides, who were a cadet branch of the cartographers. When the cartographers first drew up maps of an age, their guildsmen would take note of ages that might be suitable as tourist attractions. That information would be passed on to the tour guides, who would send their own survey team to the age and make a decision about its potential. If they thought it was a good idea, they'd decide on the level of coverage that it deserved. Some ages might be assigned a live permanent tour staff. For others, they might have just built a hiking trail with signs along it for self-guided tours. In any case, they'd publish a Korfeshken, which is a Denis word that means guidebook. An example of a tourist age that is self-guided, for instance, is the museum pod age. It's probable to say that Denis life revolved around the guilds, and it's likely that every profession was tied to one except for unskilled labor. The closest comparable thing in modern society is labor unions, although unions do not have the cradle-to-grave pervasiveness or influence of a Denis guild. And that is it for my talk about the guilds themselves. Do we have any questions now that I'm done with that? Okay.
It doesn't look like you have any.
Yeah, questions. I don't see any popping up, so. We currently have 7 guild pubs in the Denis today. The Cartographer's Pub, the Greeter's Pub, the Maintainer's Pub, the Messenger's Pub, the Restoration Pub, the Writer's Pub, and this one, which is called the new Messenger's Pub, which was added recently to the game. Most of the pubs are located in an upper-class residential district of Agra called Jatari, which, according to the map in Tokata Courtyard, appears to be off towards the southeast part of the island. The pubs are circular 3-story buildings that are shaped like a dome with a short roofless cylinder set in the top. There are 5 pointed arched windows set along the top of the top cylinder. On the bottom level, there are 7 alcoves. 4 of the alcoves contain small rooms with the remains of furniture. One alcove is a larger room meant to be a small common library. One alcove is a short corridor leading to a balcony. The last alcove leads to a larger room similar to the common library room. Each of the alcoves is 4 steps lower than the main floor. There is a second floor, which is an observation gallery, and has a corridor with a shelf for linking books on one side, and a door leading into a room for private meetings. In the Restoration Pub, this room was expanded and converted into a puzzle by Guildmaster Kadish. The 3rd story of the building is made up of an inaccessible wall with windows. It's only decorative and has no roof, leaving the structure open to the air above. The 3rd floor walls are of a smaller diameter than the lower floors, giving the building a top that is shaped somewhat like a bottle. Now, something that's interesting is that only the Watchers Pub, which is also known as the Restoration Guild or the Great Tree Pub, existed during the time of the Denis. The rest of the pubs appear to be different instances of the Watchers Pub that were created by the DRC for the use of the modern day explorer guilds they established. Certainly, there was no such thing as a guild of greeters in historical Denis. There is a way for you to test whether or not this is true. If you have fully upgraded your key device and link into the Watcher's Pub, you will find your key will give your location coordinates. The link-in point is 18,270 torans, 22 shafiti in away from the Great Zero, and negative 48 shafiti below the Great Zero. That places the pub in the surrounding section of Chitari Residential District at 105 degrees from the zero meridian, just a little south of east. Around 300 feet from the Great Zero center mark, and around 700 feet below the Great Zero. The elevation is higher than the Agra waterfront esplanade, which is negative 93 shafiti. However, if you link to any of the... Now, that said, it is the Guild Pub, or the Watcher's Pub, I should say, is the only one that actually will give you a reading. If you link to any of the DRC Guild Pubs, your key will report your position as 000, which means that it is not getting a signal from the Great Zero. The Watcher's Pub was built to be a social center of the Denis elite and had side chambers with comfortable seating and game tables. Currently, they are blocked off by heavy drapes and have been stripped of most of their furnishings. However, if you look at the stream window, I am going to show you the background picture that I chose for today. And this is pre-production art that shows what the original concept would have been for the Watcher's Pub. And you will notice that there is an alcove very clearly visible, which has an Iohik table in it. Okay, I'm going to stop here for just a moment. Let's see. Sky is Blue is asking, are you a part of the Guild of Tour Guides, Larry? And the answer to that is all of the tour staff are unofficial members of it, but we've never formed any sort of real structure or organization. Say, the Guild of Tour Guides, as an aside, was actually a combined creation of myself and Richard A. Watson. We came up with the guild I came up with a guild symbol for it. Then I got together with him, and we actually worked out the name of the guild, and then and also the words for tour and guide. So and from there it was Richard who decided that there was all that stuff about it being a cadet branch of the cartographers, and that it was actually a historical guild. So we were just playing around with the concepts, and all of a sudden it was official.
Oh boy. You do have So, so did the guilds basically replace any?
That's
Or
what I was about to read. Okay.
no.
Yeah. So the next question is, did the guilds basically replace any aristocracy the Denis had? And the answer is no. There were higher class and lower class Denis that exist, and their ranks or social status had nothing to do with guild structure. However, guild masters were automatically a form of aristocracy. So basically, you could become, if you weren't born as a noble, it was theoretically possible to become one by rising high enough in the ranks of, say, a minor guild. And then, what makes a place a pub? Pub is a kind of a generic word that the DRC chose for any place that served as a kind of social center. So it could be an actual public house the way we think of them, in that a place that you would go to hang out and get drunk.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly, the pub in on Agra Island in Tokata 2 is a pub in that sense. This one is kind of a combination of the two. The other pubs were basically just places for people of that particular guild to hang out. And that applies to all of the modern guild pubs that we have now. Okay, now let's see. Oh, I forgot to
Yep.
put my
No
screen
more
back up.
questions.
Okay, so let's go ahead and turn the Oro window back on. Okay. So here, in fact, this my next paragraph kind of deals with that. The Watchers Pub was built to be a social center for the Denis elite, and had side chambers. Excuse me, I mentioned that. So I'm sorry. So when you go to each of the pubs, you'll find that it's decorated with tapestries, wall carvings, peculiar floor tiles, and features the colors of the guild to which it belongs. There's a large floor viewer in each one of them, which is usable with anyone who has access to the pub. And we won't talk about Chitauri just yet. Okay, and that covers the introduction. Now, since we are currently in the Guild of Greeters pub, we're going to go ahead and talk about them.
We're in the Guild of Messengers Club.
Excuse me, you're right. I keep saying that, don't I? I keep getting those mixed up. Sorry, that's me being brain dead. Maintainers. Here we go. So, the Guild of Messengers. Historically, the Guild of Messengers were one of the 18 major guilds that dominated Denis society throughout its history, and from whom the ruling council was elected after the abdication of King Kurth. They managed all of the empire's messengers managed all of the empire's communications, both government and civilian. Because the empire spanned hundreds of ages, which were spread across hundreds of worlds and possibly even dimensions, the task was a huge responsibility and not easily accomplished. As far as we can tell for today, there was no method whatsoever to send voice communications across ages. Our key devices can send text and image files. However, the key devices were not invented until fairly shortly before the fall of Denis, so throughout thousands of years of history, they didn't have them. And that meant that letters, packages, voice and image recordings, and other means of communicating had to be hand carried to their destinations by messenger guildsmen. And I do say the word guildsman deliberately because, as one of the 18 major guilds, the Guild of Messengers was barred to women. When they had to carry a lot of mail at any given time, of course, they used pack animals to carry stuff because a living creature that was touched to a linking panel would link through. However, there is another guild of messengers that we need to talk about, and that's the modern one. Or they call themselves the Restored Guild of Messengers. When Uru Prologue began in 2003, the only Explorer Guild that was operating was the Guild of Greeters. They had official endorsement from Cyan Worlds and Ubisoft and assisted new Uru explorers who had questions or didn't know what to do. During Prologue, explorers who wanted to know what was going on in different fan groups had to look up their particular websites for information. This was cumbersome and inefficient, and it was easy to miss an event by not knowing which website to visit. The founders of the Restored Guild of Messengers wanted to solve the problem, but there were issues. Cyan had announced that there would be more explorer guilds than just the Greeters, but that announcement was made before this Cavern storyline was revealed. They didn't explain how the guilds would be formed or organized. That meant explorers were on their own when it came to forming support groups. Because of lack of information, explorers were reluctant to form groups with Cyan guild names. Instead, they created groups that had other names that they came up with. When the idea of forming a guild of messengers was announced, some of the pre-existing groups that had taken on the job of providing news and information were angry, thinking that the proposed guild of messengers would attempt to shut them down. They had to be convinced that that wasn't true, and that the objectives of the Guild of Messengers were to create a centralized group that would act as a relay between them. The three main organizers who formed the Guild of Messengers were Linut, who was the leader of a news group called the Relayers, an explorer named Andros, and another named Shimmerillion. The Relayers passed event notices to neighborhoods that had a population. This was very useful because there would be periodic visits by DRC members and other storyline-related activities that an explorer could easily miss without somebody telling them that they were happening. There was also a subgroup of the Relayers that were called the Moderators. They passed along questions from explorers to non-player characters when the NPCs were not in Cavern. An evolution of the Relayers was a group called the Cavern Criers. They took turns calling out news in a central location on Agra Island in a way that was similar to the shift stood by greeters in the Guild of Greeters neighborhood. They also passed out key-mail news reports and lists of recurring events. When the Guild of Messengers was formed, the Cavern Criers became affiliates of it, and later they were integrated into it. While all of that was going on, Shimmerillion built a test website and community members paid for related domain names to direct web searches to it. A news feed was added to the site. and members of the Guild of Messengers began collecting news postings from Uru fan websites and forums to share through it. It was in 2007 that the Explorer Guilds began to take structure. An explorer named Ratelti, who specialized in Uru history, became the guild advisor to the DRC. Cyan endorsed 5 major guilds that would be spotlighted in Corel, and tables were set up to provide information and to distribute t-shirts for them. The 5 official guilds were to be the cartographers, the greeters, the messengers, the maintainers, and the writers. Explorers got together to discuss what roles the new guilds would take and what their long-term goals would be. Elections were held to establish the leaders of each guild and the rules they'd operate under. At some point around this time, Lynette retired as guildmaster of the Messengers and was replaced by an explorer named Martin. Thanks to knowing that they were now official, the roster of active messengers grew rapidly, but all of that came to a halt when GameTap announced that it was closing access to the Cavern. The Guild of Messengers began planning how they could maintain communication between fans after the Cavern closed. An explorer named Sophia joined as a consultant for the revamped and expanded website, which included forums, a newsletter, tutorials, the Cavern Criers page, and a link to a new site called rel.to. Rel.to had originally been a private project of Martin, and after the Cavern's closure, it became the perfect place to keep community resources organized. It provided short URL names and a searchable directory of as many Myst and Uru-related web pages as possible. Martin bequeathed it to the Guild of Messengers, and it's still operating to this day as a useful resource for the Myst fan community. I'm going to go ahead and type that out. The site is rel.to. Whoops, that went to Mirabot. Here we go. Rel.to. There we go. The Guild developed a newsletter to keep fans involved and talking. An explorer named Theramin replaced Lynette as the newspaper editor and expanded it into a digital magazine called Go. Around 2009, an attempt was made to revitalize the Guild of Messengers because of rumors that Uru might reopen. But the game revival was delayed and the excitement died away. The Guild of Messengers leadership drifted off over the course of the next year, leaving just one member named Leonardo to make council decisions. Production of the Guild magazine was stopped, and the only service still active was the site newsfeed, which was managed by an explorer named Zark. On February 8th of 2010, Uru was finally relaunched. Explorer Andros came back to the guild to help recruit new members. The magazine was reinstated, and the Cavern Criers were also revived, although in a different form. In the reopened Cavern, the only difference between Criers and normal messengers was how often they logged into the Cavern and what they did there. Criers logged in often and ran a circuit of Tokena Courtyard and populated neighborhoods to distribute key mail notices. Messengers mostly just showed up to assist with specific projects or events. In May of 2010, the first all guilds meeting and fair was held. The fair didn't gather much interest and was discontinued, but the all guilds meeting was successful and is still a regular monthly event. The name is deceptive, as it isn't a gathering of explorer guilds. The All Guilds meeting is a monthly gathering where groups or individuals announce new projects or events and give status reports on old ones. And it's open to anyone who wants to attend or participate. Around August of 2010, Luan became the chief editor of the Guild magazine, and the name was changed from Go to its current name, which is the Cavern Post. As of this lecture, the Guild of Messengers is still operating in a reduced capacity. They maintain their websites and a Facebook page, and criers still occasionally operate in the cavern when explorers are present. In November of 2015, Dubes retired from moderating the all-guild meeting and handed the job to Koravev, who had been translating the Guild of Messengers website into Italian. In January of 2017, the Guild of Messengers website and domain name were lost, and they still haven't reclaimed the domain. The site was offline for 2 years until it was revived by Dubes in 2019 with a new domain name. The pub that we are in right now is called the New Guild of Messengers Pub and was created by Dubes. It may be his idea of what the Guild of Messengers might have done if they really were making a pub for themselves. The linking point of the pub is 61,921 Toranti by 27 Shafiti by negative 72 Shafiti. That puts it in the same general part of the Guild Hall complex as the Baron's city office, but just a little lower down. An elevation is a little higher. The elevation that it's at is just a little bit higher than the Canyon Bridge, which is negative 75 Shafiti instead of 72. And it's above the level of the Tokata Courtyard, which is negative 80. The placement of this pub would be very close to the Guild Hall Tower and the Tomb of the Great King, but lower down. I can't guess its actual placement in regards to the Baron's City office because we don't have accurate key readings for the office. Okay, I just noticed that Kitty Renee was in the stream chat is saying Denis measurements are confusing. And thanks for the compliment on my beard. But the Denis measurements are Toranti and based on Toranti and Shafiti. Toranti is the measurement of an angle of a circle, the way that degrees are. And there's, I believe, 64 or 65,000 of them. And then Shafiti is the Denis equivalent of a yard or a meter and is approximately 15 feet. Scott Miller is asking, why is this called the New Guild of Greeters Pub? That's because to differentiate it from the original Guild of Greeters Pub that was made by Cyan. Okay. The New Messengers Pub was created by Dubes and first announced on April 5th of 2014. It was initially released on the Gin Shard on June 6 of 2014, replacing the old Messengers Guild pub in the Nexus. With the release of Chiso Preniv on Gin, the linking book to the new Messengers pub was moved to Chiso Preniv, and access to the old Messengers Guild pub was restored in the Nexus. Along with Chiso Preniv and Ville Tsavan, the new Messengers pub was released on the Minkata testing shard on June 23rd of 2020 for testing in preparation for its release on Mula on August 21st of 2020. And that's everything I have about the Messengers. Okay. The Tomb of the... Kitty Renee is asking, the Tomb of the Great Kings, where is that? When you're standing in Tokata Courtyard and looking at the Guildhall complex, you'll notice that there is a capital structure on the top of it. That is the guild hall itself, which is kind of a central meeting place where representatives of various guilds would go to discuss things between them. The Tomb of the Great King is buried underneath it. If you were to go fly up there, you would see that the Guildhall Tower is set on a circular courtyard. It's under that courtyard that you will find the Tomb of the Great King. So it's not something that we can see normally. However, actually I can show you that. If you go to the tour screen, I can bring up... I'll bring up a photograph. This is what I'm going to be showing you in just a moment is... Okay. This is actually concept art, so the guild hall that we have now does not look like this. However, it is good to show you as an example. If you look at the picture, which doesn't look like it's quite shown up on the stream yet. Let me refresh that page to make sure. In any case, when you look at the photograph, assuming that it's showing right now, you will see the Guild Tower, and then you'll see the level of the courtyard, and you'll notice that the tower breaks off into struts below the courtyard, in which there's a large empty chamber. In between the struts, you will see a small building with a lot of columns near the top of it, so it kind of looks a bit like a Greek structure. And that is the Tomb of the Great King. Okay. And I'll go ahead and take that down. Actually, no. While I'm at it, I need to show you... I wanted to show you a... If you look around here, you will see the symbol of the messengers scattered all over the place. And I'm putting up my version of that symbol on the screen at the moment. Okay, so let's go ahead and window capture. Okay. Mirfak, we are done talking about the messengers. So why don't you warp us to the next location?
And then I have a few questions, I believe, unless you
Okay.
answered them while I was gone.
Let's see. I see. Well, they were talking about the knee measurements, the tomb of the great king, and I don't see any. Oh, excuse me. But the Guild of Greeters is not running. Me and Andriasso is the only active member structure at all. We'll be talking about. Yeah, that's Earl is asking that, and we'll be talking about the greeters in turn. So and I'll be mentioning that about that.
Yeah. I have one from Scott Miller that
Actually, hold on to
says,
it for just a moment. I have to go away for a moment.
okay.
I can go to. So I go to Cavern season.
Okay, I'm back. So, what was the question?
The question comes from Scott Miller. Says, so upper class Dunny and lower class Dunny, they're members of the same guild, would rub shoulders. Is there in is there as in public they keep apart?
Well, yeah, not everyone was a member of a guild. You had manual laborers who were fairly low on the social scale, and they were not members of any guilds.
Eh, I don't see
There
any other
was,
ones.
yeah, there was also a class of what you might call untouchables, which were the lowest of the low, and never got mentioned very really in any official Denis documentation.
Okay. That was the only question I could find.
Okay. Let's see. Where is the bot right now? Okay. In that case, the bot's in position for our next location. So PM the word link to him and we'll all meet there. This is the first of the pubs that we'll be talking about, which probably did not exist during Denis times. These pubs were made for the modern, the fan-run guilds rather than existing then. I had mentioned earlier that these were instances of the Watcher's Pub. Everyone's here?
I have one strangler.
Okay. If it's just one, I'll go ahead and start talking.
Go ahead.
This is the Guild of Cartographers pub. Historically, Denis cartographers were a major guild whose job it was to create maps of new ages, as well as updating, maintaining, and distributing maps of the Denis Empire as needed. Most evidence points to the maps done by the cartographers as being extremely comprehensive. They often included features like ocean floors, underground water sources, geography, major wind directions, and ocean currents. In other words, they contained everything that might be of importance to a person who was going to link to the mapped location. Because of the importance of their job, cartographers were part of the first wave of Denis explorers to enter a new age after it had been approved by the Guild of Maintainers. The things that distinguished this pub from the others, in addition to the wall symbol, which I also have a version of, so let's go ahead and bring this up. And then there are actually two different versions of the Cartographer's Guild symbol. This is the one that's found here in the Cavern. But if you go to Minkata or look at the Atris map, you will see this symbol on it. Why there are two different ones, we don't know. Now, the Guild of Cartographers was also a fan guild that was formed during the Live era from November 2003 to February of 2004. Their founder and Grand Master was an explorer named Patrick the Photographer. The need for a guild of cartographers became obvious when explorers were first roaming the new ages that were being released by the DRC back in 2003. After visiting a new age, explorers would return and try to describe the locations and travel routes they'd discovered, but were rarely able to make other explorers understand. They could escort people to the new areas and point out what they wanted to show them, but that was inefficient for more than one or two people. Also, it was common for explorers to make up location names based on whatever they thought was unique about the place, and the names were inconsistent and caused a lot of confusions. Many different names were applied to the same places, and some names were applied to several completely different places. There were Denis maps with names for places, cities, and buildings, and the Fan Guild of Linguists was translating those names and maps as best they could. However, many that were translated remained unknown to the new explorers. Along with the Guild of Linguists, the Explorer Guild of Researchers was attempting to recover place and building names too, but getting the information they discovered distributed was difficult. The goal of the Explorer Guild of Cartographers became to accurately map age and cavern locations and apply as many accurate names to them as they could. They distributed the maps as widely as possible to help eliminate the chaos among explorers at the time. They developed methods and rules for mapping by counting running paces and using key directions and coordinates. However, they weren't always able to find a name for things, so in many cases the guild simply chose what they thought fit the place the best. And let's see if I can find you a quick example. Okay. Never mind, that's not working out as well as I'd hoped. Anyway, and that's pretty much everything I have to say about the historic and modern Guild of Cartographers. So let's see. Okay. Kitty Renee is asking about the two guild symbols, so let's go ahead and take another look at those. The one that I'm going to put up right first, this is the older of the two designs. And while it's very hard to make sense of, it's actually less nonsensical than you would think. You were talking about it having a compass on it, and that is on the other one, and that's on this one too. If you look at the square box on it, in the lower half, there's an item that looks like a chevron that goes from around the center down to the bottom edges, and that is the compass that you see on the other image too. Most of the squiggles that you see around that were in theory supposed to be Denis letters, but make absolutely no sense. And then if we look at the other one, which is the one that's here in the pub, yeah, that is a basically a protractor as its main point with a number of radiating lines around it. The symbol, the round disc in the middle, is a type of plumb bob, which is used on instruments that are supposed to help you figure out what absolute level is. So it's basically a weight to keep a line straight. Actually, hang on just for a second. I'm going to go to my web browser and go to my DeviantArt page. And I'm logged out. What I'm doing at the moment is I'm looking for here. Let me open up my web browser. Okay, so if we go down to here we go, gallery, and then as long as we're here, this is a place where I put digital art that I do. And a number of the places, the things that you're seeing here are supposed to be guild symbols for the Denis. So for instance, I made this up as supposedly for the Guild of Engineers, Pirates of the Black Fleet ships, zoologists, sculptors, illusionists, educators, bankers, artists, architects, musicians, burial workers, actors, the tour guides. At the moment, I'm just scanning through. My idea of what a fun t-shirt might look like. Linguists, archivists, earlier version of linguists, stonemasons, analysts, mechanists, caterers, healers, miners, books, ink makers, legislators, surveyors. Okay, this is the picture that I came here to find. This is a much more detailed version of that symbol that for the Guild of Cartographers, and so that you can see much better what it's supposed to look like. Okay, let's go ahead and yeah. Okay, and let's see, I need to get this out of my face so that I can see what I'm doing. Okay. Okay. Lou, yeah, the Misty Tech, I do a lot of their static artwork. So I designed their logos and and a few static pictures that are used in the series. Okay, anyway, and I'm not seeing any comments that relevant comments right now. So that's it for the what we have to say about the cartographers. So, are you ready for us, Mere Fact, to go to the next pub? Okay, Kitty. That is absolutely one word I would never use to describe myself. At least not with the end on the e on the end of it. It took me many years before I started referring to the stuff I do as art.
Okay, I move to the Greeters pub.
Okay, in that case, we are going to link to the bot and go to the next location. In this pub, the let's see. In this pub, the decorations, as you see, are in the green that was adopted as the official color of the Guild of Greeters. However, it was not really an official color per se, because each of the greeters got to choose the color of their official shirt when they were first inducted into the guild, and they were stuck with that particular color for the rest for the duration, because it couldn't be changed afterward. Let's say the historic Guild of Greeters didn't exist, so there's no information about it. In the modern times, the Guild of Greeters was an explorer support group that was formed in 2003 by Ron Miners, who was the Myst community manager for Ubisoft. He created a set of guidelines for such a group. Those guidelines were approved by Ubisoft and Cyan Worlds before he recruited an explorer named Tajara to lead it. The goal of the group was to provide new players with help by welcoming them into the cavern and asking any questions they had. Greeters were identified by a special t-shirt with a Helping Hands logo, which you can see on the symbol on the wall in this room. They wore that t-shirt when on duty. The greeters stood regular shifts in the Guild of Greeters neighborhood and wandered around in other locations, such as new neighborhoods where beginners might be found. Being a member of the Guild of Greeters neighborhood didn't make one a member of the guild. Instead, an application had to be submitted to guild leadership, after which the prospective greeter was tested for proficiency in a number of knowledge requirements. After the 2007 closing of the Cavern, most of the active greeters moved on to other hobbies or games, and the guild leadership lost interest in maintaining the guild or inducting new members. When the Cavern reopened in 2010, the apathy remained. A few of the old members came back on their own and remained for various lengths of time, but the organization was never revived, and new applicants didn't get replies if they asked to join. So while in theory the Guild of Greeters still exists, it's functionally dead because the leaders never passed on control of it to new members. Oro had mentioned earlier that he and another person are all that remains of the organization, and of the two of them, Oral is the only one who actually stands shifts in the Guild of Greetershood. Oral, if you would please, could you type the name of the other member once more? Since 2010, several attempts were made to form explorer groups to fill the functions of the greeters. All of them failed, mainly because none of them would-be greeters were willing to stand regular shifts the way the original guild members did, and so were rarely around when new explorers needed them. Inevitably, the members of those groups lost interest in turn and stopped trying. Currently, there are no active groups filling the role of greeters in the Cavern, although unofficial volunteers or old members of the guild sometimes stand watches. Okay, yeah, the other still active member of the greeters is Andrew Yossa. Thank you, Aurora. And that's pretty much everything that we had to say about the greeters. If there are any are there any questions? Especially since we have Ural, who is a former member of the guild, or actually, I should say the last remaining member of the guild, here to answer.
I'm not seeing any questions.
Yeah, it doesn't look like any are popping up, so I guess Mirfak, we're ready for the next guild pup.
And we
Okay,
have
I
about
think
25 minutes left. So.
We'll get as far as we can, and then I'll just put off the rest for the next tour. We'll definitely be doing the Watcher's Pub in that one. Okay. We are now ready to link to Mirobot, so the next pub is the Guild of Maintainers. The Maintainers were the Denis law enforcement agency for anything that dealt with the writing or use of books. A book could not be used before approval from the Maintainers, and no one considered a link safe until it had received Maintainer approval. When A New Age was written, and after it had been reviewed by the Masters of the Guild of Writers, that book was turned over to the Guild of Maintainers for inspection. The Maintainers would read the book thoroughly to find any possible errors that might have been missed by the writers. If it had passed that inspection, then preparations would be made to use the linking panel for the first time. The first Maintainer to use the book would be a specialist who was dressed in heavy protective armor and that contained a fail-safe method of automatically returning to Denis. During the preset time that the Maintainer was to be in the age, sensors in the suit would gather data about the atmosphere, temperature, level of sunlight, visible plants, and the animals around it. The Maintainer would make mental notes about what he could see as well. A Maintainer had to be present for the initial survey instead of just sending an instrument package because of the way linking worked. an unmanned sensor suite could not trigger a book's linking panel. That could only be done by a living being who touched the panel and wearing the sensor suite as he made the jump. After the initial survey, the data was examined. If the age was thought to be safe for further exploration, teams would be gathered from several guilds. These teams included members from the healers, surveyors, and the cartographers, along with more maintainers. They perform an in-depth examination to determine whether or not the age was truly safe, to establish the Denis coordinate system in the age, and to map the area around the link-in point. Only after it passed that inspection would the age be open for general use, although exploration might continue for quite some time afterward, depending on how much work needed to be done. Maintainers were also responsible for conducting periodic inspections of approved ages to ensure that they continued to operate safely and to watch for any signs of criminal activity. One thing that you'll notice about the pub that we're in, by the way, is that the floor pattern is different. This is more of a continuation of the patterns of vines that you find on the banners floating above.
Would I do have a question. Would the Guild of Maintainers be something similar to like a military or a
Police
force that
force.
we need?
A police
Police
force. Yeah.
Okay.
Basically, the Denis had several different organizations. The Palace Guard was responsible for keeping the king safe, the king's family safe, and for guarding the palace itself. They were not law enforcement officers. But the next level down was the city guard, and as far as I know, they were more or less the local police. There was a professional military that they had, but it was very small and had nothing to do with running Denis on a daily basis. They were only there to be called up as the core of a conscript army if something happened. And then the last level of enforcement was the Guild of Maintainers, and I liken them to being the sheriff department. In other words, instead of having their primary business being policing the Denis caverns, they policed everything outside the caverns. So that would include all of the ages that had been written.
Okay.
In modern times, when Cyan Worlds proposed an Explorer Guild of Maintainers, their stated intent was to have a pool of explorers who would be the very first people into a new age that was released as beta testers. They would put the age through its paces for stability and functionality and report any bugs found. Once they'd done their work, the age would be marked as having maintainer approval before regular explorers would be permitted to go to them. In practice, that never happened. For one thing, Cyan decided not to farm out any sort of beta testing that way. The Explorer Guild of Maintainers was formed and completed elections for several leadership positions at the end of November of 2007. But the Cavern closed in 2008, and in the summer of 2009, the leadership of the guild stepped down officially and took on the role of moderators for their website forum. The Explorer maintainers offered their service as beta testers to the creators of fan ages, but that ultimately led nowhere because the members of the Explorer Guild of Writers didn't see a need for them. At one point, other fans noted that there actually seemed to be open animosity involved. As a result, active membership in the Guild of Maintainers dwindled to the point that in 2011, a year after the Cavern reopened, a poll for active members of the Guild got just 2 responses. And that is it for the Guild of Maintainers. So, the next one, please, Mirfak. And while I'm waiting for Mirfak to move the bot, were there any questions about the maintainers that I'm?
I don't
I'm
see
not
any.
seeing it at the moment, but I just asked the question.
I'm filming. I'm
Okay.
in writers.
Okay. The next one is the Guild of Writers, and it'll be the last one that we cover today. And we'll cover the Writers Pub next month. Which, by the way, the next tour is going to be October 29th, 28th or 29th, which is the correct day. 28th. October 28th. Let's go ahead and link to the bot. Although I guess most people already have. We should be able to fit this in 15 minutes, I hope.
Alright, got everybody.
Okay. And you will see that the floor here is just like the Guild of Greeters in that it's a duplicate of their of the vine pattern along with their symbol. The historic members of the Guild of Writers were the only people who were officially recognized as being qualified to write descriptive books. It was the Writers Guild that wrote all of the official ages for private enterprise, the government, any other guild that required ages, and most private individuals. However, in practice, members of influential families sometimes learned to write descriptive books without being members of the guild. As an example, Atris the Elder, who wrote The Age of Gimmedet, even though he was a member of the Guild of Surveyors. And he taught his future wife Anna how to write ages as well. The Denis Guild was strict and hidebound, having inherited centuries of rules and regulations from their Rhone ancestors about what they could or could not write to create an age. After long experience, the art had been codified and writers were taught to follow the rules to the letter. This meant that Denis had a wealth of previously gathered knowledge to work with, but experimentation was forbidden and creativity was stifled. Ailish wrote an oath that for the guild that every last one of them swore to after he wrote it, and continued to swear that oath right up until the fall of Denis. It was meant to prevent the abuse of ages in order to enslave or mistreat Aratanti peoples, which meant outsiders. The restored Guild of Writers was one of the 5 guilds that Cyan created, or proposed, I should say. They proposed the Explorer Guild of Writers as a group dedicated to the creation of fan ages. It proved to be one of the most successful of the Explorer groups and has been continuously in operation ever since its founding. And that founding was around February of 2004, about the time when the first run of Uro Live was shut down by Ubisoft. A group of fans began posting on the Clockwork Orange bulletin board server, which was also known as COBS. Their aim was to figure out how to continue playing Uro online and how to add new content to the game. Unfortunately, in July 2005, the COBS database crashed and was unrecoverable. So most of this early part of the Guild of Writers history is lost. In August of 2004, 2 things happened at about the same time. Cyan Worlds announced Until Uru, a project that allowed the creation of Uru shards running on fan-owned servers. Then Omlis announced a project called a live-compatible Uro server, or AllCugs. That software, which is to run an Uro shard server, is still actively used by the Deep Island Shard. More software tools such as PRP Explorer appeared, and that allowed software modifiers to understand how this game stored age data and how to modify it. One such modification allowed models from various ages to be combined. This was first done manually, but later people learned how to automate the modifications, and they were commonly used by game bots. And they are commonly used by the game bots created by explorers like our own Mirfak. A little later, things like texture replacements started to appear, where people would reskin models with their own textures. One such reskin in a shard placed graffiti on Kareth's arch that said, "Huru was here." In 2006, Omlis returned with another software tool called the PRP Blender plugin, or PYPRP. This was the first tool programmers could use to create files that could be exported into the game. Starting in 2008, an explorer named Hoikus, also known as Tsar Hoikus, generally picked up more and more of the responsibilities, such as running the writer's website, administering their forum, and upgrading the guild wiki. On August 2010, the guild released an AllCugs-based shard called Deep Island, and that's hosting, currently, more than 190 fan ages. On April 6th of 2011, the year after the Cavern was reopened as free-to-play, Cyan Worlds officially released the source code of the Uro Live client, which was called the Cyan World Engine, or CWE, and they also released the 3ds Max 7 plugin. 5 days later, the guild announced a house version of the Cyan World Engine. Soon, more fan shards were launched. The Open Cave came on August 1st of 2011. OpenUros.org's Minkata shard was on December 11th of 2011. The Guild of Writers Gin Shard was released on February 4th of 2012, and the Destiny Shard was released on February 1st of 2013. With Uru's source code released, Cyan Worlds became more accepting of fan modifications in the live game on a limited basis. In the early days, it was just bug fixes. On February 3rd of 2015, the first fan-made item of clothing appeared. It had been created by an explorer named Chloe Rhodes. On July 11th of 2015, the Guild released the first version of Corman. Corman is a plugin for Blender made to replace PYPRP, the old age creation tool. And finally, on October 28th of 2019, Cyan announced that the Mool assets were open for fan updates and modification. Previously, fans have been permitted to create bug fixes and updates to repair broken parts of the game. Those were submitted to Cyan for testing and implementation. The 2019 announcement was basically an official sanction for the creation of new game content. Previously, Cyan had been very protective of the game's form and function, but since then, several fan ages have been added to the Eurolife server, although none of them as of yet have official Cyan backstories. And do we have anything? Any questions from that have come up?
I don't see any.
Let's see. Okay, Scott. There was a conversation about the relationship of the guild T-shirts in relation to the pubs, and that is correct. You can only visit the pub that you have when you're wearing the appropriate T-shirt. Or I believe, no, I take that back. You don't have to be wearing it. You just have to have it in your closet, and you can only have one at a time. Kalami does not have a Cyan backstory, or at least not the one that's currently in the game. There was supposed to be an official Cyan version of Kalami, which was going to be much more elaborate. However, it was never made, and all the backstory elements only apply to it. The fan-made one is basically a tribute to the ideas that Cyan had for the original Kalami, but it's not the same thing at all, and doesn't share the story. Yeah, okay. And then
I think we can end it here, do you think?
Yeah, the last stop is going to be the Watcher's Pub, and it's going to be much too long to cover in 4 minutes.
Yeah, we've covered that much history in 4 minutes.
Okay, let's see.
All right. So I want to thank you all for joining the Cavern tours. Thank you, Larry, for being our host. Muralbot, and Mirafect for being our technicians to get to these ages. Me being your host. Normally Susan and Arte are here to help host and add insight. Don't forget, if you want to help keep the lights on, and if you like these events and stuff, then don't forget to donate to the CavCon, so that we can keep the lights on and we can keep bringing these tours to you every year. And don't forget about the other events that is happening in the Cavern, and I'll send it off to you, Larry.
Okay. I'm trying to get... There we go. Because Arte is unavailable today, there will not be any story night tours or sessions today. And that means that the only other, if you look at the stream window, the only other event today is at 1600 key time, and that's the karaoke event in the new Messengers pub. I've got a picture up on the screen that shows the listing, and you can see the website URL. I should say address that you go to hear the audio for the session. As I mentioned, and then again, as I mentioned, the next Cavern tour, which we know will be covering the Watcher's Pub, and that's a pretty lengthy one, is going to be next month since we ran out of time this month. And I believe that's just about it. So, unless we have any last minute questions.
I don't think so.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, story night is not actually being held because Arte's traveling right now. Okay. And I think that's pretty much it for us. So I'll say goodbye to everyone and end the stream now.